What does Governor Mike Huckabee think about the IRS scandal, and what should be done about it?
When I first heard that the IRS was targeting not just conservatives, but pro-life groups and pro-Israel groups and veterans groups, first of all, I was really in a state of disbelief, because you'd like to think that that particular part of your government is above it, that they just aren't going to go there because they know how incredibly illegal that is. Then that disbelief turned into rage, and it still is where I am on it, because I can't think of anything that is more offensive to me as a citizen, and should be to every person. Even if they embrace the ideas of the left, they should know that once the IRS, the one agency of government that gets to really treat us as if we are guilty until we prove that we are innocent, the only agency like that in our government, when they can begin to use their power as a political weapon, then it is the beginning of the destruction of the great republic that we call America.
Let's take that tactic, because I've been saying that on principle, an income tax, the very principal idea behind the IRS, the 16th Amendment, the whole genre, violates the 1st, 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th, and 10th Amendments. 6 out of the Bill of Rights that are natural ordained. Is that an unjust form of taxation?
Well, the income tax is wrong on a number of fronts. I think it's not only that it's unconstitutional, because it does violate so many of our fundamental rights: the right to speak, the right of freedom of association, our freedom of religion. But there's another principle behind it. It violates the most fundamental common sense issue of the economy. Why do you punish productivity? Why would you punish somebody for working? The income tax is a form of penalty, a form of punishment. It is exacting something out of the people who work. Now, we're supposed to value work, but if the government says, we value our money more than we value your work, taxation is what is the natural result of that. So let's just keep in mind, an income tax is when the government decides that its need for money exceeds the value of the work that you did. It devalues the American worker. It devalues that person who came home bone tired with an empty lunchbox from having worked on a construction project. And when the government reached into his pocket and said, yeah, you made $100, we're going to take 40 of it. So your work really wasn't worth $100, it was worth $60 or $50, because we're worth more than your work. That ought to be an outrage to every working American.
Are the American people, is the Congress going to hold this administration or anyone in this scandal accountable?
If the Congress does not hold this administration, and frankly, it's not just about the administration. Let's look at it a bigger term. If Congress doesn't hold their government, and specifically the IRS, accountable for the things that they did, which were nothing short of a criminal enterprise, then every one of those congressmen that didn't do their constitutional duty of oversight should be relieved of duty. Because this is a big issue. The IRS has become a criminal enterprise, much like the mafia, except the mafia operates with at least the honor of not whacking the women and the children. They only whack the other mafia chieftains. The IRS is whacking ordinary innocent people who are not chieftains of anything. They're just citizens with a point of view, and they're supposed to be able to be absolutely guaranteed as a sacred right the ability to speak, to think, to express, to disagree. And when the IRS comes down goose-stepping all over their backs, then we've lost one of the most important privileges we have as American citizens.
Are the churches really subject to limits on political speech per the Johnson Amendment, or is that an immoral affront, and should the churches say what they want to say and preach truth?
You know, for all these decades, people in churches have been so afraid to actually go out and say what they really believed and wanted to say, because they said, well, we can't get in trouble with the IRS. And I think finally it started occurring to people, wait a minute, the IRS isn't bigger than God, and it's not even bigger than the Constitution. And so I'm delighted to see pastors across America on Pulpit Freedom Sunday stand up in their pulpits and all basically just clench their fist and dare the IRS to come get them. It has never, ever been challenged in court, and the time has come. Let's throw it out there. Let's test it. Let's just see. And I think even with the liberal court that they're going to ultimately have to rule, they have to rule, that the IRS doesn't have the power to stop freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Because if they make that ruling, what have they done? They have just shredded the First Amendment, shredded it. Our liberties are guaranteed by the law. When the law begins to threaten our liberties, liberty wins and the law has to be changed. And I think we're going to get to that point, maybe sooner than later, in light of some of the crazy things we've seen with the heavy-handed approach that this administration has taken toward 91-year-old veterans of World War II going to see their memorial, taking the drinking fountain handles so that joggers on the trails.
This is America, a beautiful necklace of rare gems, different colors from different places. If they could speak, you'd hear 171 languages. But the miracle that produced this necklace 233 years ago, in the greatest burst of freedom the world has ever seen, is this thin, fragile piece of string that holds all this diversity together and has made you the strongest and most prosperous nation on earth, allowing us all to remain different but unified as a people with this, the common bond, the thin, fragile piece of string. I am an American. The enemy within condemns this belief by shouting our differences are our strength. Yes, but only if you continue to be united behind one country, one culture, one language, one rule of law. There is no unity in a pluralistic society unless there is a common bond you all support. You cannot unite around differences. If this common bond is broken by any means, then there can be no common sense, because common history, common values, and common law no longer exist, and you've lost the United States of America, regardless of what state the economy is in. Now, the enemy within say you must destroy American sovereignty, open your borders, and become an international halfway house for the rest of the world, all paid for, of course, by you, which you can no longer now afford. Global democracy, global economy, global governance, lumping all human beings into a homogeneous mankind that does not now nor ever has existed in reality. Convincing you that nationalism and pride in country is extremism. Engage the world, yes, but never surrender your independence to it. The dismantlers of your history, your traditions, your founding principles are the elite brain dead who have redefined the definition of liberalism to mean you serve the world best by giving away America's strength, raising taxes on the 60% of taxpayers who pay for the 40% who pay nothing, reinstigating the welfare state with more giveaway programs that effectively erase all dignity and personal responsibility and declare all minorities are helpless victims, not independent human beings. They've rewritten American history and have already brainwashed 2 generations of your children, taught to blame America first, to criticize before understanding the generosity and nobility of their own history. What you teach in your schools today becomes government policy tomorrow. How can you expect young people to appreciate their country when they've been taught a putrid lie by these dismantlers, that America is the cause of all evil in the world? The dismantlers are the enemy, but not the problem. Then what or who is breaking our common bond? If you're the one who says our children are our future, but do nothing to stop the shameful disparity of quality of education between suburban schools and inner city schools, with 50% of black and brown children dropping out, becoming drug addicts, alcoholics, unemployable, with an 80% possibility of being a burden to society the rest of their lives, then you are the problem. If you're not on the phone, in the school board meetings demanding excellence, but instead are pleading for a breakdown of the common bond with more bilingual education, costing the taxpayer billions of dollars and doing nothing to hasten assimilation, then you are breaking the common bond. Billions of dollars you can no longer afford. If you're all for lowering standards so everyone can pass, pushing stupidity and mediocrity toward graduation, then you are the problem. If you allow the dismantlers to label it anti-immigrant because you demand all newcomers enter legally, learn English, our history, and salute our flag, then you are the problem. It's not about discrimination, immigrant bashing, or a lack of charity. It's about maintaining the glue of your common bond and the rule of law. If you don't rise up and throw out your insane mayors and hypocritical bishops who declare sanctuary cities for lawbreakers, inviting more lawbreakers to come and drink at the well of the taxpayers' money, then you are the problem. If you're a white person who doesn't recognize the effects of slavery and years of welfare dependence have adversely affected black people, then you are the problem. If you're a black person who calls all criticism racist and all intelligent discussion, then you are the problem. I wrote the first anti-slavery essay in America in 1775. I founded the first abolitionist society in the country and wrote the first rough draft of the Declaration of Independence, specifically calling for an end to slavery. I know the ugly face of racism, and modern America is not a nation of racists. Opportunity and anti-discrimination laws have leveled the playing field. Take advantage of both and stop thinking of yourself as a victim. And understand, all conflicts are simply memories of the past. If you can't get over them, you condemn yourself to be destroyed by them. It's time to put away the race cards and unite behind the common bond. It's the strength without which there is no America. Your brave servicemen and women, black, white, brown, red, and all the colors in between, are giving their lives and their blood to protect you from the enemy without. It's your turn to stand up and defeat the enemy within. Restore your common bond. There have been 10 generations of Americans since this nation was founded. Each left this country in a little better condition than when they inherited it from their parents. Yours is the first generation at risk of doing the opposite. Let that not be your epitaph. When America was being torn apart by the dividers and the dismantlers, the silent majority stood by and did nothing. Join the Second American Revolution and fight for the common bond. It's your first and last best hope to preserve the life of America. My name is Thomas Paine. Yes, these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. May you never be numbered among those cowards. Take back America now.
Whoa.
Woo!
I want to welcome everybody here today to the Wichita Tax Freedom Forum, Evil Under the Dome. We're sponsored tonight by AMAC, the American Association of Mature American Citizens, also Fair Tax Kansas Association, Fair Tax KC, Wichita State Republicans, College Republicans, and Political Chips. My name is Randall Fout. I am the delegate for AMAC in the 3rd Congressional District, Johnson County. I'm also the legislative liaison for Convention of States, as well as being a board member for Fair Tax KC. Oh, hitting the wrong button. Happens that way, doesn't it? A little bit about our agenda tonight. First I want to introduce our speakers and our sponsors, some of our supporters and honored guests. Then we're going to start with the federal perspective on Evil Under the Dome. That will be brought by our keynote speaker, Todd Tehart. I know typically you have your keynote speaker last. We're going to change things up a little bit, and in fact, every one of our speakers today is a keynote speaker in their own right. Followed by Todd Tehart, we're going to have Judge John Rubin speak about matters in the state. And then finally, Bob Weeks, who needs no introduction here in Wichita, well-established supporter of conservative causes. We'll have a brief period of question and answer session with all three present for that. And then we'll talk about action steps here in the state of Kansas, where we go from here. As I mentioned, sponsors tonight are the Wichita State College Republicans, who graciously assisted us in obtaining this facility, AMAC, Political Chips, and Fair Tax KC. I'd like to recognize some supporters that are here tonight. Obviously, Congressman Todd Tehart, representing the Libertarian Party candidate for governor, key number, King. Thank you. We also have with us tonight the Southeast Kansas Conservatives Group, the Woods Brothers, and also present is the Convention Estates Project for Kansas. And I'd also like to recognize that we have in the audience with us tonight Senator Ty Masterson. Senator. We call this event Evil Under the Dome. Some people have indicated to us that they think that's a rather harsh statement. Well, is it?
Nope.
How do you define evil?
Accurate.
Obviously, the Webster's Dictionary gives us a definition, which says that evil is causing harm or injury to someone marked by bad luck or bad events. It also says that it's morally reprehensible, sinful, or wicked, and arising from actual or imputed bad character or conduct. We say that the IRS is an extortion organization that extorts money from taxpayers. Extortion, to obtain from a person by force, intimidation, or undue or illegal power. Also to gain especially by ingenuity or compelling argument. Corruption. We talk about corruption in the IRS and in Congress. Corruption is dishonest or illegal behavior, especially by powerful people such as government officials or police officers. And coercion. To coerce is to make someone do something by using force or threats to get something by using force or threats. So is the IRS an evil organization?
Amen.
It is. And these are troubling times for liberty. As everyone knows now from the press reports, the IRS has been identified as targeting anyone that opposes an over-expanding government, not just Tea Parties, but also religious organizations, voter organizations, things like that. And as we all know now, suddenly they can't seem to find any of the emails that indicate the traffic between these various parts of the government concerning this issue. Very troubling times. But in the meantime, the IRS is $17.5 trillion in debt and rising. That's $152,000 for each and every taxpayer. And $128.9 trillion in unfunded liabilities when you include Social Security and Medicare. That's over $1 million for each and every one of us that pay taxes. So we the people, we got mad, we organized, we protested, we rallied, and we've attended town hall meetings to confront our representatives in Congress and in the state. And still our elected officials have done nothing. Why is that? Well, the reason is they don't answer to us. They answer to those that actually direct their actions. Why? Well, the reason they don't answer us is because they know how to divide us. They know how to divide us between left and right, liberal, Democrat, conservative, Republican, black, white, Hispanic, so many different ways that they divide us to keep us from being organized. And they also answer to their own masters. Those masters are the K Street lobbyists. Over 12,000 registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and guess what? Over half of them are registered to lobby on tax issues. In fact, they spend so much money that over $6.7 billion annually is spent in lobbying our representatives in Washington, D.C. alone. That does not include on the state and local levels. That's more than $12.5 million for each and every representative in the House and Senate. As a result of that, the K Street lawyers have grown our tax code to over almost 74,000 pages now. And it makes it totally vague, intentionally misleading, contradictory, and completely indiscernible. Now, recent revelations demonstrate that politicians of both sides have weaponized the IRS. They're using it for their own political purposes. So what do we do about it? Well, it's time that Americans of all walks of life work together to obtain in all political stripes, to obtain a tax code that is fairer, more transparent, and less intrusive for each and every taxpayer. And that time is now. And that solution is the fair tax. Some characteristics about the fair tax, real quick. It can be both for state and national. It is a consumption tax or a retail sales tax. It only applies to goods that are sold new at retail, not used goods at all. And it also eliminates all taxation on income, both personal and corporate. It also eliminates capital gains and the death tax. It also eliminates all payroll withholding from your check. So each and every dollar that you earn, you get to keep, including FICA, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. All of that goes away from your taxes on your income. And it eliminates early withdrawal penalties for seniors for savings in 401ks, pension plans, things like that. That means that all savings for retirement would grow tax-free. Now, since there is no income or payroll tax, there is zero cost of compliance with the tax code. There's no form to file. There is nothing to turn in to the IRS to show how much you earn. You simply pay tax when you buy things at retail. The Mercatus Center has told us that the hidden cost of the compliance alone is over $500 billion a year. Think about that. Compliance costs over $500 billion each and every year. So if we can remove that cost of compliance, then the cost of goods and services will drop by approximately 20%. So the best thing about the fair tax is it completely eliminates the IRS. And that's what we want to do. Taxes collected by the retailers who then pass it along to the states. The states then send the money into the treasury. No more tax forms to file. And both the state and the retailer each get a small convenience fee. That convenience fee then makes this, it's not an unfunded mandate. They're actually being compensated for the effort to turn that money in. So, the test, does the fair tax eliminate the IRS and its evil actions? Yes, absolutely it does. And would the fair tax work for the state levels as well? It absolutely would. But we'll let our guests, both for state, local, and on the federal level, elaborate on this. My next speaker is Todd T. Hart. Todd T. Hart is a one-term member of the Kansas Senate, 8-term member of the House of Representatives. He is also the founder of the House Economic Competitiveness Caucus, and he is a proven conservative for Kansas. He is also a Republican primary candidate for Kansas for the 4th Congressional District. I welcome to the podium Todd T. Hart.
Good evening. I just have one correction to make to the other one. I guess I changed this. Can I make this go back?
Yeah, that's all.
All right. Now, my name is spelled wrong up there. The reason I'm going to tell you this is because I want you to go to my website. And if you don't spell it right, you won't get to my website. It's TIAHRT. It's a very difficult name. No, I'm not, Randall, I understand completely. It's been spelled wrong my whole life. My brother-in-law says I should buy a vowel and put it between the H and the R. It's TIAHRT.com. I'd like you to go visit that and see, keep up with the campaign. I'm here to talk to you about why the fair tax isn't getting any traction in Washington, D.C. and why that disappoints me, because I want the fair tax. I need the fair tax, and I think this country needs the fair tax.
Hey!
For emceeing, and I want to thank Earl Long. Where are you, Earl? Earl, you've done a great job of bringing the fair tax to Kansas, and when I close this out, I'm going to tell you why that's important. Thank you for all the hard work.
Earl!
I want to thank Steele Estes, too, with the College of Republicans. I know it took a lot of effort to get this set up. So, Steele, thank you very much. Coming out tonight. Now, we have quite a few vacant chairs here tonight, but in truth, they're not because of you. I want you to think of 10 people that you know, 10 people that you go to church with, that you work with, that you see in the grocery store. If you will talk to them about the principles we're going to discuss tonight, you will fill this room. Every seat here will be filled because they will hear the message that we're going to present to you through your eyes, through your ears, the way you tell them. So it's very important that you reach out, not be satisfied with just what you hear tonight, but put it into action. Now, when I first went to Washington, D.C., I went into the Longworth building. My office was in the Longworth building. It was 1317 Longworth. I told there's a lottery in Washington based on your class. So I was in the freshman class, and everybody drew a number out. And I went and drew my own number out because I thought, well, I'm as lucky as anybody. And I drew out of 74 members of Congress, I drew 68. They started at 1. So I told my staff, I want a window with a view of, I want to see some plants. I'm from the Kansas Plains, Mackenzie, I want to see some plants. Well, when I looked out my office window, I saw a natural gas power generating plant. It wasn't quite exactly what I had in mind. But as I walked in the front door of the Longworth building, there was a whole long line of phone booths. There's more phone booths in the Longworth building than any other building in the Capitol. Now, before cell phones, of course, that's the only way you reached out. Why in the Longworth building? Because it was just outside the Ways and Means Committee room, and that's where they write tax policy. That's where all the focus was, on the tax policy. Now, while I was there, I pushed for the fair tax. I fought for it. Yeah. I demanded hearings. And when I went to, but I was denied. And I went to Charlie Rangel, who was running the committee at the time. And how many of you heard of Charlie Rangel?
The guy that's got illegal property.
When the chairman of the tax committee doesn't pay his taxes, there's something wrong. We need a fair tax, don't we? But I said to him, Charlie, I want to see a hearing on the fair tax. You have time to do it in the schedule, let's do it. I want to see a fair tax hearing. I want to be able to testify. And Charlie said, Todd, well, I'm chairman, that is simply not going to happen. I said, Charlie, tell me why. He says, because I like the current tax code. I said, how could you possibly like the current tax code? The current tax code has thousands of pages of paper, thousands of IRS agents. It takes billions of dollars to complete it. How can you possibly like it? He said, because I can reward my friends and punish my enemies. Those friends and enemies are all political action committees. They're all lobbyists. So what we need in Washington in order to get the fair tax is somebody who is separated from the lobbyists, who represents the people. For me, it's always been about public service. It's been about the people. It's not the perks of international travel. It's not the privileges you find in Washington, D.C. It's not the power to bully other people around. It's about the people. And the people need the fair tax.
Hey, hey. Hey.
Congress, you were there for 60 years. Did you just like the power, or you miss Washington, D.C., or is it because you still got a house there? No, I do have a house there because I'm upside down in it, and I'll sell it to anybody here if they'll give me what I got in it. No, I'm going back because I'm disappointed in what's going on in Washington, D.C. I'm disturbed by what's going on in Washington, D.C. When I see how the Political Action Committee has got its grip on the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, somebody's got to go back there and separate them and start to get something done. And I want what to get done is start getting hearings on the fair tax so we can change the minds of Americans, working Americans, and get them behind this cause. Now let me tell you how the Political Action Committee works, and I'll use my race as an example. I supported Mike Pompeo when I started. I gave him great hopes. He even asked me for advice, and I gave him a lot of advice. He followed one piece of it. He got on a good committee. I told him how to get on a good committee. He got on a good committee. But the rest of it, he hasn't done. But he has connected to the PAC community. In fact, in the first quarter of this year, he got $2,770 per working day from political action committees. He got 4% of his money from Kansas and less than 1% from individuals of less than $500. So it came from either somebody who's very wealthy or somebody who's in political action committee or somebody outside of Kansas. Now, how does that impact, how does that find its way into legislation? What is the evidence that happens? Well, Mr. Pompeo, when he first got to Congress, had an amendment that said we are going to prohibit the federal government from publishing consumer complaints on defective products. Now, did you hear anybody here say, I don't want to know when I stick my keys in the ignition of a car that it's going to catch on fire? I don't want to know that. No, there was no public outcry for that. In fact, the reason GM's recalling 2.1 million cars is because of consumer complaints about defective products. Well, why would somebody put that in? Because there was a political action committee somewhere that said this is a very good idea. Another piece of evidence. Mr. Pompeo put in legislation to prohibit the labeling of genetically modified organisms, GMOs. Now, have you ever heard a mother say, I don't want to know what's in my kid's cereal? Don't tell me. Don't tell me that. I think we all want to know what's in our food, don't we?
Right.
Now, Monsanto doesn't want you to know what's in your food. They don't want you to know what's the base of the chemicals in the fertilizer. They don't want you to know how they manipulated the genes in the seed. They don't want you to know what goes into the herbicide and the pesticides. They don't want you to know that. And Mr. Pompeo has a bill that prevents that from happening. Are you for the moms or are you for Monsanto? I want to know.
Yeah. Moms.
Moms, me too.
All day
But
long.
political action committees like Monsanto and other chemical companies don't want you to know. The third thing is NSA listening to our phone calls.
Yeah.
How many of you wants the NSA to listen to your phone calls? How many of you wants NSA to read your emails or read your texts? I don't. I don't. Well, why would somebody support NSA doing that when none of us want that to happen? Well, because 70% of the NSA's $30 billion budget, maybe it's $31 billion budget, 70% of that goes to contractors. And contractors have PACs. And PACs give to congressmen. And congressmen defend the NSA listening to your phone calls. And Mike Pompeo has done that. In fact, he told students right here at WSU last November, go ahead and make the calls. Go ahead and send your emails. The government doesn't want to listen to your phone calls. Well, they are.
Yeah.
General Clapper, the head of the director of national intelligence in the United States of America, the top guy in all of the intelligence community. He has 16 agencies underneath him, and the CIA is included, and so is the NSA. And he said, yes, we are collecting data on private American citizens. And they're doing it without a warrant, without Fourth Amendment protections. Our own government and our own congressman is supporting that and protecting that. Why? Because of political action committee money. Over $2 million was given from the contractors of NSA to the House Select Intelligence Committee, which Mr. Pompeo sits on. Over $2 million. Now, Mr. Pompeo was also tied very closely to John Boehner. In fact, he's the only congressman in Washington, D.C. that's been appointed to 2 select committees. No other member of Congress has been, but Boehner's boy has. Now, what does that make? How does that affect what's going on in Washington, D.C.? Well, when it comes time to fund Obamacare because it's in a spending bill, Mike's been there 7 times. Disconnected from us, just like the rest of Congress is disconnected from us.
Amen.
So how do we change that? Well, you put somebody in Congress who will fight for you, who will listen to you, who will take your challenges to Washington, D.C. and change it. And we don't have that today. That's what's wrong with Washington, D.C., and that's why we don't have the fair tax. It's because we don't have public servants anymore. We've got people that are too into the power, the perks, the privileges. So, now, one gentleman asked me about term limits, and I've been there 16 years, so I think it's a fair question. If you understand how powerful the bureaucracy is now in California, where they have term limits, you would think differently about it, at least I do. I had a member of Congress named Joe Baca from Southern California, a Democrat. Now remember, in California, the Democrats own everything lock, stock, and barrel. He said, when I take my bill in to get it filed, I have to go into a conference room where House leadership sits on one side and the government unions sit on the other side. And I can't get a hearing on my bill until the government unions start nodding their heads saying, yes, it's okay with us. So who's running the ship over there? Who's running the asylum over there? And that, with 2.5 million bureaucrats in our federal government, they already treat members of Congress like temporary help. If we give them inexperienced help, we're going to end up with more of the same. It'll be more like California and less like Kansas. So we have got to change that. And I think it's sending people back who understand how the bureaucracy tries to pull the wool over your eyes, who understands how political action committees work. I've seen it from both sides now. I never lobbied. I started a business back here in Kansas when I got to Congress. All the other guys that left when I did started lobbying. They're part of the 12,000 that you know of. I wanted to run a business. I ran my own business, and I ran somebody else's business that was going bankrupt, and we turned it around. Instead of having a $6 million year, we had a $22 million year. I know how business works. I know how Washington works. I know how political action committees work. And if we're going to get a fair hearing on the fair tax, we're going to need somebody like me to go back to Washington, D.C. and kick somebody behind.
Hey, hey.
Yeah.
I guess what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to John, and then we're going to turn it over to Bob, and then we'll take questions, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
And are you going to do the introduction?
John, do the introduction.
All right, well, I'm sorry. I would love to.
If you want to do it, you're absolutely welcome.
We do questions now?
Well, thank you, Rachel. Taking the privilege of power. The power of the microphone. John Rubin's been a friend of mine for quite a while now. And there are people that I admire in life for several reasons. I admire them because of being elected. It's tough to get elected and to put yourself and your family through that. But more than that, I admire him as a person. He's been a judge. We have had confidence in his decisions for a very long time. But he understands how the process works, and he wants to change it so that we can see more clearly how the process works. Amen. And there's so much going on in Topeka in a short amount of time that we can't keep track of it. The only people that keep track of it are the people who are lobbying in the Capitol in Topeka. It's because they're paid to do that. But what John Rubin has in mind is to open up the window for us as common citizens to be able to see what's going on, and so that we can weigh in on what we think is the right thing to do, because it's all about public sentiment. I was going to close with this, and forgive me for dragging this up, but I want to quote Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said, "With public sentiment, anything is possible. Without it, nothing is. So those who make public sentiment are more important than those who write laws or interpret them," meaning the legislature, the courts. John Rubin is opening the window so that we can weigh in and we can take our public sentiment to Topeka and change things up there. So John, God bless you.
Well, thank you, Todd, very much. Those words are greatly appreciated. You did me a great honor. Isn't Todd T.R. terrific?
Yes.
We need Todd T.R. back in Washington. I'm proud to call Todd my friend, and I'm proud to say that you'll find no stronger supporter for Todd's return to Washington than me. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for coming out tonight. Really, really do appreciate it. And it is important, as Todd said. It's important that you all are so committed, that you all are here, that you will spread the word when you go back and talk to your friends and neighbors about a lot of things we're going to talk about tonight. You know, our topic for the evening is evil under the dome. And I can certify that there's quite a bit of evil under the dome, under the Capitol Dome in Topeka. There's quite a bit of evil that goes on under the Capitol Dome in Washington. Todd detailed some of it for you. And there certainly is an awful lot of evil going on in the West Wing of the White House right now.
Amen.
I'm going to talk about Topeka. I'm going to talk about the fair tax. I'm going to talk about transparency and accountability in state government. I'm going to get to that. But, I mean, just allow me for a minute. And these are all things that you all are well aware, whether it's Benghazi, where this administration purposely lied about the cause of the uprising and purposely covered up the lie afterward for political reasons, so that the storyline that we got bin Laden and terrorism is over could be perpetrated during an election year, where we had a Secretary of State actually say, what difference does it make? We had an ambassador and 3 other brave Americans killed. The reasons for that uprising, the reasons why there was not a swift and sure response, boots on the ground to protect them, are vitally important to their families, and I would submit to all Americans. What difference does it make? We have veterans dying, waiting for medical care, while illegal immigrants that flood our borders are getting immediate free medical care. Men and women who fought, put their lives on the line, bled, suffered post-traumatic stress disorder and everything else, are dying because they're being put on phony waiting lists, again, to defend the administration. It's an outrage. There's a new outrage every day. You know, the latest, of course, is the Bergdahl situation. How dare this commander-in-chief flout the laws of the United States by not getting Congress's prior clearance before releasing 5 of the most violent, vicious, dangerous terrorists sworn to destroy the United States back into the field where we still have troops whose lives are on the line in Afghanistan. How dare he do that? And then, of course, there's the IRS scandal, which brings us to our first topic, my first topic, the fair tax. You know, I will remind you all of something. Do any of you remember what the second count of the bill of impeachment against President Nixon was? Go ahead, give us an answer.
IRS against his enemies.
That's exactly right. Using the IRS for political purposes against his enemies. Nixon lost 18 minutes of audio tapes. This administration has now conveniently lost 2 years of emails about that scandal. The original lie in that case was just a rogue office in Cincinnati that did that. It turns out now that folks in Washington knew about it. I think we ought to open an investigation immediately on this and see how high it goes and see if it reaches into the West Wing of the White House.
Amen.
We certainly did with Nixon. We need to do it now. Anyway, thank you for allowing me some of those observations, but I want to join Todd in thanking everybody that has sponsored the event tonight. I want to give a particular shout out, as Todd did, to Earl Long and the great work he's done on behalf of the Fair Tax in Kansas, to Alex Poulter and the political chips people joining in the fair tax and other fights for our conservative values and principles, to a dear friend of mine who happens to be my constituent and supporter who I value, Dale Chaffee, known to many of you as the Geezer, and to all of you here that helped make this evening possible. Again, my heartfelt thanks. I won't belabor this. We all know the evils of the income tax. I mean, who ever thought that in a capitalist society it would be a great idea to punish the most successful achievers in America? To say, we're going to tax the product of your endeavors, and you know what? If you work even harder and earn more, we're going to tax you even more. We're going to make it a progressive income tax. If it wasn't for the progressives of the early 20th century that pushed that across, and that very cleverly at the same time instituted the idea of withholding rather than having people have to pay that tax like you pay a sales tax at the counter, we would never have had that outrage. I do believe it's unconstitutional. I believe it is antithetical to everything that we stand for as a capitalist society. I'm going to make some references a little bit later to some comments by John and Robert Kennedy. Yes, I know they're Democrats. Remember, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat too. That was back when the Democratic Party was different than it is now. I remind you all that the first large decrease in the marginal income tax rates occurred during the Kennedy administration. I didn't bring the quote with me, but there's a great quote from President Kennedy to the effect that we have to stop over-penalizing the producers in this country because it is an absolute drag on the economy and it kills jobs. And we all know that fundamentally. We knew it then, we know it now. One of the reasons why while I haven't made a final decision yet, I am strongly inclined, I attended one of the meetings, and I'm strongly inclined to support the Article 5 Convention of the States that's being proposed. As I see that as our best chance to repeal the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. And if we could limit the Constitutional Convention to that, and to eliminating the 17th Amendment and restoring legislative election of senators as was intended by the founders. So we know it punishes the achiever. The income tax punishes the achievers. It does a lot of other things too. You know, what revenue policy should be about is one thing, raising revenue. We all recognize that it takes taxes, it takes revenue to run the country, to run the state of Kansas. Nobody denies that. No right-thinking person denies that. But that's all tax policy should be about. That's all the fair tax is about. As Todd so well put it in the comments of Congressman Rangel, shared by, I would say, virtually all Democrats, and frankly a lot of Republicans as well, is they see the IRS and our current income tax code as a way to do a lot of things other than just raising revenues. Rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies, or as we call it, picking winners and losers. Well, here's what you get when you put the government in the business of picking winners and losers. It invites corruption, like the federal IRS scandal, like Lois Lerner and so many others right now. It invites scandals of the kind we have in Topeka, Evil Under the Dome, the Capitol Dome in Topeka. We have a couple of programs in Kansas, one's called PEAK and one's called HPIP, that reward Kansas businesses with tax breaks, income tax breaks, for doing various things. And a recent audit by the independent, nonpartisan Legislative Post-Audit Committee in Kansas found that those programs were rife with fraud and misrepresentations by the companies that are claiming those tax credits. You know what? If you don't have an income tax, you don't have any of those things. I've been on a number of radio talk shows recently, some on Kansas City Public Radio. Yes, I'll go anywhere to espouse the principles that we believe in. And a question I've been asked more than once is, how do we stop this border war between Kansas and Missouri raiding businesses from each other? Well, you know how we raid businesses. We give them tax breaks. You know how you stop the border war? Get rid of the income tax. Then you'll stop the border war, and you'll stop every other situation where you do something other than raise revenue, where you reward winners and punish losers or enemies. Those reasons, as much as any, are the reason why we need the fair tax. It's also fairer to all Americans. It's fairer to the achievers, to the people that are the engines of our economy, that create jobs that make life better and raise the standard of living for all Americans. Those are the reasons why I support the fair tax and all the others that you know. I'm not going to belabor it, but I want to talk to you a little bit now about where we are in the state. The best result on the fair tax is if we can get it enacted at the federal level nationwide. That's how you're going to get rid of the IRS, that or the Article 5 Convention. And so I commend Todd so much. Congressman Huelskamp, I believe, is on board. I believe Congressman Yoder is as well. And so our Kansas delegation is very strongly behind the fair tax. We need to get it done in Washington. But that's going to take some time. And even before that gets done, we can start, and Kansas can lead the way on this. We can start by getting the fair tax enacted in Kansas.
Man, yeah. Woo!
A lot of folks that think I'm all wet on this issue say, well, but John, you can't do that. If you enact a fair tax and Missouri doesn't have it, it's going to make Kansas non-competitive. For example, services are going to be taxed by the fair tax now, as well as goods. It'll make Kansas non-competitive and so forth. Well, I will submit that we will be the leader that will, cause that dam to break, to cause a virtual onslaught of states throughout the nation following our lead and enacting tax systems that are fairer to their people.
Amen.
For those of you, a couple of things that opponents of the fair tax like to say, and I'm sure you all know this, but I just want to make sure that you can adequately answer those that raise these points. A lot of people call it a value-added tax, which is destructive of the economy. In Europe, not surprisingly, socialist countries in Europe have used a value-added tax for a long time. Fair tax is not a value-added tax. You do not add tax at every stage of the manufacturing or production process with a fair tax. Only the end product, and it applies only to new goods or services, not to resales. So be sure you remember that. There are a number of other arguments made, that the one I already mentioned that would make us non-competitive with other states, but none of those hold water. There are 9 states already that don't have an income tax. That's a form of fair tax right there. They derive their tax from other sources of revenue, but they don't have an income tax. And not coincidentally, in the recently completed recession, for those of you that think the recession is over, and we're not headed for another one, of the 10 states that fared best economically and created most jobs during the past recession, 9 of them were the 9 states that don't have an income tax. That's not a coincidence, folks. And the governor has a plan, which I support, to march to zero income tax, to get rid of income tax in Kansas, but it's a very long-term plan. It's a very slow plan. I'm not satisfied with it. I think we need to put a stake in the heart of the income tax in Kansas, and I think we need to do it right away.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Get it done.
So what have we done so far? Where are we? Well, that's where we get to the shenanigans. I'll use that word instead of evil. The political gamesmanship under the dome. There's been a fair tax bill, thanks to the efforts of Earl and many others. There's been a fair tax bill introduced every year in recent years in Topeka, and obviously we haven't gotten it done yet. 2 years ago, we had about, Earl can tell you the exact number, 30 some odd, 34, 35 co-sponsors, of which I was proud to be one, of the fair tax bill. This was in 2013. By the time the bill got to the tax committee for consideration, all those names had disappeared.
Yeah.
Only one representative's name was left on it. That was Representative Siegfried's. I to this day don't know exactly how that happened, and that bill did not get a hearing. That was not satisfactory to me this year for this past session, 2014. So last fall, working with Earl and a number of others, and working with our revisers, we put together the new and improved 2014 fair tax bill, in which we got over 25 co-sponsors. I was proud to introduce it. It was referred to the tax committee, where it died a very quiet death, again, never getting a hearing. We can't let that happen again next year.
No.
I plan to be back the first day of session next year with a new fair tax bill, with the input of Earl and everybody else among the fair tax folks. I plan to get as many co-sponsors as we can get. We'll have a new chair of the tax committee in the House next year. Richard Carlson, the current chair, retired at the end of last year, at the end of this session. And I will not rest, because that bill is a fair hearing and a much better or down vote on the House floor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, another topic. How many of you think that you can count on your state representative or senator to always know what he or she is voting on in Topeka on your behalf, and to cast a principled vote on what they're voting on? And I'm not saying a vote that you necessarily would agree with, but a vote that squares with their principles. How many think that goes on in Topeka? Well, you know, it doesn't. It does sometimes, but it often doesn't, because of a procedure we have in Topeka called conference committee reports. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here. I'll be happy to answer any questions about it, and you all might be familiar with it anyway. But that's the first of the 2 Rubin rules that we're talking about here. I love the poster, everything, but the picture. Forget that mugshot on there and just look at the rules. What happens with, I would say, many bills, in some sessions, most bills, is you don't get a standalone bill that passes out of a House committee, is voted on the House floor, goes to the Senate, gets a hearing in a Senate committee, passes the Senate, gets a vote in the Senate, and is passed without changes, or vice versa, the Senate to the House, and goes to the governor. That happens, but those are minority bills. Most bills, there's going to be some changes between the two houses. One house passes it, there's going to be some change when it goes to their house or goes to a conference committee. According to the current joint rules of the Kansas House and Senate, once it goes to conference committee, the conferees, which are the chairman, the vice chairman, and the ranking minority member of the two committees, the House committee and the Senate committee that the bills originated from, they can, in addition to negotiating and working on changes and compromises on that bill that they've got in conference, can add as many more bills to that bill in conference as they want, so long as that is whatever else that is added has passed one or the other house. So it might be something else the Senate passed. It has to be at least generally related to the same subject matter, but that's a pretty loose relationship. But the Senate may have passed something that the House never saw, but it could be added in conference committee. That has been used in the past to add 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, I've seen 12 bills added in a conference committee report, perhaps half of which were never seen in the House before. And it normally happens toward the end of session, and I can assure you that you have to scramble. I do my best, but if it's a committee, if it's from committees that I didn't serve on, it's very difficult, even for me, and certainly for someone that's less motivated than I. It's very difficult to know everything that's in the bill. Problem one. So you don't even know what you're voting on. And number two, if it's a bill that has 6 other bills or 12 other bills added to it, you, as a representative or senator, may be 4 square behind half of the bills that have been added in that report. You might, it squares with your principles, it's the right thing for your constituents, you're ready to vote on it, but then you look at the other 6 bills that were added, and they are diametrically opposed to what you believe in. They're bad for your district, they're bad for your constituents, or you believe it's bad for the state of Kansas. But you get one vote. You have to vote the whole package up or the whole package down. That ain't right, folks.
Nope.
So the first thing that I proposed this year, well, I've done it 2 years in a row now, haven't got it done yet, we're going to get it done next year, I promise you that, is to amend the joint rules of the Kansas House and Senate to say that no conference committee report henceforward can have anything in it other than the bill being conferenced and at most one other bill. That greatly increases the chances that representatives and senators are going to know what they're voting on, and they'll have much less conflict between the bills. And it's time we get that done so that you can count on your senators and representatives to know what they're voting on and to vote the principles in the interests of their district, their constituents. That's rule number 1.
Yeah.
Rule number 2, record every vote. What I'm going to tell you now has to do just with House procedure. Senate procedure is a little different. I'm a man of the House, and so I can tell you how we do it in the Kansas House of Representatives. When a bill comes to the floor, there's a 2-step process. The first day that the bill is considered, it's considered in what we call a committee of the whole on general orders. And that's when that's really when the bill gets all the action on the floor. That's when it's fully debated. The person carrying the bill stands up and argues the merits of the bill. People that oppose it get up and into the well and say why. Other people that support it say why. People can bring amendments to the bill and so forth. The amendments are voted on, any changes to the bill will be voted on at that time, and then the bill is voted up or down at that time on general orders. Would it surprise you all to find out that, except for unusual circumstances that occur rarely, none of those votes are recorded? None of those votes are recorded. So you will have no idea, unless your representative or senator tells you, you'll have no idea how they voted on an amendment to one of these bills on general orders, or how they voted on the bill itself. Now, the next day, the second half of the step is, first of all, if we vote on general orders and we vote the bill down, you might never know at all where your representative stood on it because it didn't get to a final vote. If it's voted up, then it does come to a final recorded vote the next day. But what if your representative changed his mind between general orders and the next day? What if he voted against it one day and for the next, or vice versa? Wouldn't you like to ask him why? Would you like to ask him maybe, did you talk to a lobbyist overnight? Or why did you change your mind? Now, the representative doesn't have to tell you why he changed his mind, but you got a right to ask him.
Yeah, you got a right
But you
to
can't
know.
do that if you don't know how he voted the first day. Well, that is, in substance, what these rules are about. Bundle no bill, record every vote. So the other rule proposal I have, and this would be a change of the House rules, is that every vote on general orders in the House on a bill or an amendment has to be a recorded vote.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
This is nothing less. I'm a strong advocate of accountability and transparency in government.
Amen.
I think that it is a privilege for me and every other member of the Kansas House and the Kansas Senate to be there representing you. It's a privilege and an honor to do so. And the very least, as I go door to door, as I'm doing again this year, of course, we're up for re-election every 2 years, so I'm running again this year. And I appreciate your support. When I say going door to door and people engage me in conversation is, I can't promise you I'm always going to vote the way you like. Either can tell you there have been a couple times we've disagreed, believe it or not. They're rare, but they have. But what I can promise you is I will always cast an informed vote, and I will always let you know how I voted and why. And then you can make your decisions, whether you want me back 2 years from now.
Amen.
I think that's what you all are entitled to. That's accountability and transparency. I believe in it throughout government. I'm not going to digress here except to give a shout out to a bill that I had the privilege of researching and drafting and taking the lead on getting passed in the legislature this year that the governor signed into law about accountability and transparency in law enforcement. It turns out that Kansas was the only state in the union up until we got this bill passed that presumptively and completely seals all law enforcement affidavits supporting search and arrest warrants. So nobody, not the target of the search, the target of the arrest, a member of the press, the public, nobody can find out the reasons behind any particular search or arrest, which are particularly troublesome when there are false arrests or when there are improper searches, as happened in a case that prompted me to look into this. We've changed that now with adequate protections to protect confidential. I'm chair of the Corrections Committee, by the way, that's how I got involved in it, the House Corrections Committee. With adequate protections to ensure the confidentiality of criminal sources or criminal informants or ongoing criminal investigations. With those protections in place, those law enforcement affidavits are not going to be available to the public. The point here is all of your elected representatives, all appointed officials of government, everybody should be accountable to the taxpayer and transparent in all their actions. And that's what these rules are about.
Amen.
Thank you. Just close with a couple of observations. And these are reminded me of this. I'm well aware of the quote, however. It was Bobby Kennedy that said this when he was running for president in 1968, right before he was assassinated, and Ted Kennedy repeated it at his funeral. To those who say to me all the time, John, you're all wet, this fair tax is never going to get off the ground, forget, we've been doing the rules. We've been doing things this way in the Kansas legislature forever. You're just, chasing a false switch if you think you're ever going to change the way we've always done business in the Kansas legislature. To that I have a response, and if I may presume to say so, it's what Bobby Kennedy said. It's actually engraved at Arlington near his tomb, near his headstone. Some men see things the way they are and ask why. Other men dream things that never were and ask why not.
Hey.
Amen.
That's what we've got to do with the fair tax.
Woo!
Our next speaker is Bob Weeks, as you all know, is a two-term member of the House of Representatives for Kansas. That's not true? Wow, I got the wrong information. I apologize.
Wow, Bob, I didn't know that.
Okay, I apologize, guys. That's it. All right. With no further introduction, Bob Weeks. Well, thank you, everybody. Okay, there we go. Well, thank you, everybody. I realize that since I'm the last speaker, I'm the only thing standing between you and the free beer that Earl brought for us. So, where's that free beer? Right? No, I don't know. I don't think you
Fairtex Brews.
Anyway, I was asked to speak about, is there a problem in Wichita? Fortunately, in Wichita, we don't have an income tax. And I know that's kind of the main target of the fair tax, although it reaches out into the issues that the other two speakers have been talking about, such as trust, accountability, corruption, evilness, and things like that. Although I got to tell you, there's at least one Wichita City Council member who laments the fact that Kansas state law prevents cities from having an income tax. So it could be. But anyway, I've been interested in problems in Wichita city government. It's something I've tried to change in my own way. Some of the things I do are, I have a blog, The Voice for Liberty, wichitaliberty.org. That's kind of the hub of everything I do. Also started a TV show last year. It's broadcast on KGPT channel 26.1. That's, regular over-the-air TV, although on YouTube as well. The Voice for Liberty radio, where I try to do some things. Interactive visualizations of data is something I specialize in, so lots of data there. And then also sometimes I make illustrated videos to try to explain these type of topics. So, is there a problem in Wichita? Well, it's a matter of some controversy. I don't think many people, the political class in Wichita, that would be the elected officials, the bureaucrats, the Wichita Eagle editorial board, they don't think there's much of a problem. So it is a little bit controversial. I'd like to walk you through a few episodes from recent years in Wichita city government. Let's see if you can make up your own mind as to if there's a problem. So here's Wichita City Council member James Clendenin and campaign finance report filed for calendar year 2012. You can see names, occupations, and so forth. Here's City Council member Lavana Williams' campaign finance report as well. Now, looking at these reports, you might be thinking, who are these people contributing this money? And here's an example of a fellow I meant to pixelate his name, I'm sorry, but it's a public record, so it's nothing there. But he's a machinist working in the aviation industry. Gave money to, this would have been to James Clendenin's campaign. So you might be thinking, that's great. Here you've got just a regular working guy giving money to a political campaign. But when you take a look at this, and when you start to think about who are these people, who do they work for, who are they married to, who are their parents, I came to realize that for 2012, the calendar year 2012, and this was right before these two politicians were gearing up to run for re-election in February of 2013, James Clendenin received $8,000, a little bit more in contributions. $3,000 was from people associated with Key Construction Company, $5,000 associated from people associated with movie theater owner Bill Warren, and Lavana Williams, $4,000, all from Key Construction Company affiliated people. Now remember those two names there, Key Construction and Warren Theater, because we're going to see them a little bit again. Now, in Wichita, wouldn't it be great? We are so blessed in Wichita because when you go to the movie theater in Wichita, you can buy barbecue sauce. And it's not just anybody's barbecue sauce, it's Wichita Mayor Carl Brewer's barbecue sauce. Yeah, he has a company that makes barbecue sauce, and Bill Warren and his movie theaters sells it there. It's the only barbecue sauce he sells, and as far as I know, it's the only grocery item that he sells as well. Now, is that a problem? Well, in the past, Mayor Carl Brewer voted to give the TIF district to Bill Warren and his partners, the Old Town movie theater there, $4 million and change is what it cost. Then a few years later, that movie theater wasn't doing well. So Wichita Mayor Carl Brewer, under his leadership, the city council granted a no interest and low interest loan that the Wichita Eagle estimated cost the city $1.2 million. A few years later, tax breaks to Bill Warren to build an IMAX movie theater in northwest Wichita. So that's a lot of expense, but the ability to buy the mayor's barbecue sauce at the movie theater, that's priceless. Well, let's take a look at entangled relationship. Here we have a picture of a couple guys fishing. Now, who are these? Well, one guy there is David Wells, the president of Key Construction. There's that company again. And there we have Wichita Mayor Carl Brewer, and we've got a couple of big fish. So obviously these guys are on a fishing excursion, and they've got some big fish there, and they look like they're having a lot of fun. So is that a problem? Well, in 2011, the Wichita City Council, there's the Ambassador Hotel downtown at Douglas and Broadway, and that hotel received a lot of taxpayer funds. But one of the things that was going to happen was that they were going to build a parking garage there, and Key Construction submitted a no-bid contract to the Wichita City Council to build this garage for $6 million. No bid contract. No one else was considered. No other prices. I don't know, maybe they wrangled a little bit, but probably not very much. Well, some people objected to that, most notably Wichita City Council member Michael O'Donnell, now a member of the Kansas Senate. He objected to that. And it said that City Council member Pete Meitzner, behind the scenes, objected too. So the city put the garage out to competitive bid. And it came back that the winning bid was $4.7 million. So saving $1.3 million on a $6 million project. And here's the real kicker. The company that submitted the winning bid was Key Construction, who under no bid, this is what the mayor wanted to do, all the city council members except Michael O'Donnell. They wanted to give a no bid contract for $6 million after competitive bid $4.7 million. Now, is this problem solved? Well, the city manager asked for it, and we've implemented some complex policies that may or may not solve this problem. We're just going to have to see. But talking about entangled relationships again, in July 2012, Cabela's, the outdoor retailer, was going to build a store in Wichita. And Mayor Carl Brewer wrote a letter to Cabela's recommending Key Construction as the company that they should employ. And he only recommended Key Construction, no one else. And later that month, the Wichita Airport was also involved with Key Construction in another controversy. Key and another company had submitted bids to build the airport, $102 million it was. Key's bid was actually more than the other one. And there was a dispute, and the city council was asked to operate in a quasi-judicial fashion to decide who should get the contract, Key Construction or this other company. Now, even the Wichita Eagle editorial board noticed that appearance matters was the title of their editorial, and they noted that unlike other cities and states, Wichita and Kansas lack pay-to-play laws. I've got an example of that coming up in a minute. So guess who's building the Wichita Airport terminal? Key Construction. I don't need to remind you, that's the guy who's with the mayor and the fish. And all the campaign contributions to James Clendenin and LaVada Williams, who voted on that airport terminal contract. And you know what? It really doesn't matter which way they voted, for or against Key. The fact that they participated in a decision involving significant friends and campaign contributors, that's a problem. Now, if you notice there's another company, Wallbridge, and it says Key Construction / Wallbridge, a joint venture. Well, right after that vote on the airport terminal, City Council member Jeff Longwell at that time was running for the 2nd County Commission. There was a primary election, Republican primary, that would have been held, that was held in the first week of August. And so right after this airport vote, campaign finance statements were filed. And we learned that there were some people in Michigan who had a keen interest in Jeff Longwell's political career and his future. And it turned out that right before and after Jeff Longwell voted for Key Construction on the airport contract, these executives from Wallbridge, this Michigan construction company that was teaming up with Key Construction, they poured a lot of money into Jeff Longwell's campaign. And only Jeff Longwell's campaign. No other city council members were running for office at the time, so there was no one else to spread it around to. Jeff Longwell was the only one who could benefit, immediately from campaign contributions. You just have to wonder, how did this company in Michigan know that Jeff Longwell was running for? I just wonder how these conversations went. I don't know. Well, you know, the Wichita Eagle asked Jeff Longwell, and he said, oh, we often get contributions from all over the country. So I looked at 10 of his most recent campaign finance reports. I found 3 contributions totaling $1,500 that all came from the same address in California. Which led me to conclude, how to succeed in business in Wichita if you're from Michigan? Well, first of all, partner up with the construction company headed by the mayor's fishing buddy. Then, contribute to the council member's current campaign. And then have these guys decide on your contract. Well, what about our city manager, who many people say has a squeaky clean reputation? Well, a few years ago, a company needed city council approval for a multi-million-dollar star bond project in Northeast Wichita. And guess who the company happened to hire to handle its public relations in Wichita? Well, the answer is the mayor's fiance, now his wife. And after the Wichita Eagle revealed this a couple days later, the city, Beth King is her name, she backed out of that project. So, you know, it's only, I think, because he was caught that she did that. You remember last summer, there were 2 companies competing to receive a contract from the city to build the apartments on the west bank of the Arkansas River between Douglas and First Street. And there was a clause in the contract that talked about conflict of interest. No member of the city's governing bodies shall participate in decisions if they have an interest or indirect interest with any of these companies. So I connected some dots. I noticed that Mayor Carl Brewer is a member of the governing body that's going to make the decision. I noted that Bill Warren is one of the parties that owns. He was one of the partners in that apartment project. I noted that Bill Warren also owns movie theaters. I noted that the mayor owns a company that manufactures barbecue sauce, which is sold in Warren's movie theaters. And I asked the mayor, I said, Mayor, do you sell your sauce at Bill Warren's movie theaters? And he said, yes. But that was it. No one at City Hall, not any city council member, I think Michael O'Donnell was gone by that time, or he might have, I'm not sure. Not the city manager, not the city attorney, not any bureaucrat thought that this was worthy of discussion. You know, we have a law in the city of Wichita. We have a law that says council members shall refrain from making decisions involving business associates, customers, clients, friends, and competitors. So you may be saying, well, why is this law not enforced? Because I think I've shown you some examples where it's been violated. Well, last summer, a colleague, a fellow activist of mine, we hired lawyers. They researched the law, and they came back with their opinion that ordinary citizens like you and I do not have standing to bring legal action under this law. Matter of fact, it's not really clear who is able to bring an action to ask that this law be enforced. Now, certainly the city attorney could. We have a city attorney. But he looks at these. He sees a law that says council members shall refrain from making decisions involving friends. And he sees a mayor. And he sees a man who wants a no-bid city contract. And he sees them going fishing and engaging in all sorts of other activities together. He gets the no-bid contract. Our city attorney says that is not a problem. And no other city council members, save Michael O'Donnell and Pete Meitzner behind the scenes, he didn't do it in a public way, at least not that I know it, thought that that was a problem. Now, I see not all my slides here. Well, I was going to show you some other slides about how in Wichita we are not doing very well. We have very slow job growth. And I've been talking about this for several years, and usually my conclusions were dismissed. But then recently, the Wichita Metro Chamber of Commerce, their leadership committee, they looked at the same data and they came to the same conclusion. Wichita performs very bad in job creation, especially private sector job creation. Also, our per capita personal income. This is not exactly a very good measure of prosperity. Per capita measures have problems, but it's a measure that Visionary Wichita, you probably heard of that organization, planning organization, they believe that per capita personal income is good. And our per capita personal income is on a downward slope compared to the rest of the country. So, is there a problem in Wichita? Well, I think there is. has some very serious problems with our economy. As this all was happening, we've had some other problems as well. You're probably aware that Wichita is thinking about asking us to vote to approve an increase in the sales tax. And we've also been told that our physical plant, our infrastructure, is in decline. Earlier this year, the city came out with a report that the cost to bring up existing deficient infrastructure up to standards is going to be another $45 to $55 million per year over what the city already spends. Now, the 1 cent sales tax that the city wants us to pass is thought to bring in about $80 million a year. But we need to spend $45 to $55 million just to catch up with what our city fathers have not been taking care of. The streets, the sewers, the water mains, everything that we bought is really going to pot, I'm afraid to say. So it would be one thing if the mayor, city council, and city hall bureaucrats recognize that reform is needed. But you know what? The mayor, most city council members, they're pretty pleased with the job they've done, with the job creating jobs in Wichita, with the jobs of taking care of our streets and our sewers and things like that. They believe that their stewardship has earned your trust and that you should give them many millions of dollars more each year to spend on your behalf to guide our city into something, I don't know exactly what they want to do. So do we have a problem in Wichita? Well, yeah, I think that we do. These are the type of things that I hope you think of and become aware of as our Wichita city leaders are going to ask us for more sales tax money in the very near future. And just be thankful that state law says, and Senator Masterson, don't you change this, that cities, Kansas cannot have an income tax. Thank you.
Hey, hey.
So we've heard how the IRS is evil, how the tax system we currently use both on the federal and state level leads to corruption, coercion, extortion. We've also learned how this is affecting the local sales tax and operations within the city and county government as well. So how do we fix it? One of the solutions is to develop an action plan. And that action plan is to build and grow, first off, here in the local area of Wichita, a local fair tax organization. The second part of our plan is to grow the Fair Tax Kansas Association across the state. Now, our goal in that effort is to pass the Kansas Fair Tax Act, that Judge Rubin talked about. It's currently before the House, HR 2625. And the next step is that we need to get the grassroots support going for that effort, both on the state level and national level. So what we want to do is try to develop district directors. District director in each of the different congressional or representative districts in Kansas. And each one of those to develop at least 50 representatives or 50 constituents within that district that are fair tax supporters. That way we can get the action going that we need necessary to bring about support for the fair tax both on the state and national level. I believe Earl had some things he wanted to talk about in that effort. Earl Long.
Hey!
What an awesome program Randall put together tonight, don't you think? Speakers, wow, awesome. Well, let's don't let this momentum die. Let's have breakfast on this subject in the morning. We're going to stay all night. Mark Sater and I are going to stay all night. And we'd like to have you all come to breakfast and talk about how to expand this group, increase the momentum here, increase the enthusiasm. We gotta grow the Wichita group, even under the dome. We gotta grow the organization so it's a viable political force. So at 8:30 in the morning, I invite you all to join us for breakfast at IHOP. IHOP is up here at Rock Road and just north of Highway 96, 8:30. For those that want to join us and figure out what we're going to do next. Any questions? Any comments? Thank you all.